Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you're new to my channel, before the video gets underway, please be sure to subscribe now for future content. If you would like to have your story featured on an upcoming video, email your story to the email in the description box below, and please be sure to leave a like on this video. Tonight's video features truly terrifying school lockdown stories. Sit back, relax, enjoy. It was late morning when the announcement came over the loudspeakers. We are now in lockdown. I repeat, we are now in lockdown. Locked doors, turn out lights, out of sight. We clicked into gear and went to the hallways to collect wanderers, which is the first step in school lockdown protocol. The idea is to clear the hallways of all students as quickly as possible. In doing this, there is a chance that you will be responsible for a student that you do not actually know. This happened to me when I picked up a student, I'll call him Hector, who happened to be on tour of the school at the time. I locked the door from the outside and barked at the kids to get away from any windows that would give a line of sight from the hallway into the classroom. My hand turned the lights off with a quick downward motion, and together Hector and my English language development students tucked into the southwest corner of the tiny room. My students were from places such as Nepal, China, Mexico, and Guatemala, as well as from the US. I knew my class very well. I didn't know Hector at all. One of the keys to enduring a lockdown is getting a good seat. Most everyone ends up on the floor, but if you can grab some real estate that butts up against the wall, it is worth its weight in gold. And this is what I was able to do after the kids were all situated. Of course. What's happening? Is this real, mister? The students peppered me with questions. A drill does not usually surpass around 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, though, it became apparent that this was definitely not a drill. Fear kicked in. I tried to keep a veneer of calm for the kids. Cell phones emerged. Students started texting. I wondered to myself, what is the protocol for texting during a lockdown? Then I texted my girlfriend. Students texted each other. I texted other teachers. We were all clueless and curious. We adjusted our seats. We settled in. Very seriously, we had to go to the bathroom. We waited. We became hungry. We waited. We raided the mini fridge and ate my colleague Diana Bobout's lunch. We made small talk. A student watched a movie on her computer with headphones. It is difficult to communicate how long hours of waiting can feel, or how the hours can pile up until suddenly a large quantity of time has passed. People are not meant to spend hours consecutively crammed in corners, particularly kids who are accustomed to a class lasting 50 minutes tops. The waiting was nauseating. The boredom was palpable. Our hunger for food was trumped by our hunger for information. We just wanted to know what was happening. A student, let's call him Roy, motioned for me to come and talk to him. I have to go to the bathroom, he said. Yeah, we all do, I said dismissively, to which he beckoned me closer. I leaned down to hear him whisper in my ear, I have diarrhea. Sending Roy out the door to the hallway and bathroom was not an option because of a lockdown protocol, which calls for the students and teacher to stay in their classroom for the duration of the lockdown. I learned later that Jill, an English teacher, tried to leave the room and sneak into the bathroom. She was confronted by police officers with guns pointed at her. Get back in your room! Get back in your room! They shouted as she awkwardly turned back, creeping with hands raised and mouth agape back into her classroom. Another teacher, Stacy, used a door that was shared with my friend John, a history teacher, to sneak into his room. Then she demanded that John and his TA go into the closet while she urinated in a potted plant. And this, a climate where police pulled guns on teachers, where teachers squatted over potted plants, this was a climate I was presently in. I can still feel it viscerally more than a decade on. I'm a rule follower, and I was not about to send Roy out into the hallway and have an officer scare the crap out of him. I looked up and saw a side door that separated our room from a neighboring computer lab. You could enter the computer lab without going into the hallway. The lab was empty. If I could get Roy in to do his business in a trash can in there, at the very least he would have privacy, and I could spare my class and Roy a moment that none of us could ever come back from. I turned to Roy and said, "Follow me." My army crawled to the door. I reached up and opened the door to the computer lab. Once the door was open, I stood up behind its protection as it was between me and the window to the hallway. I had grabbed a box of tissues. I signaled for Roy using a combination of hand signals that were either inspired by baseball or old action movies. I handed off the tissues and transitioned back to the army crawl. I pushed the door shut. Unfortunately, that was the only phase 1. I turned to find 2 students posturing at each other as if they were about to fight. 2 of my other students were in between them. Jay was flipping off Hector. Hector was flashing elaborate signs with his hands. My biggest concern was that their voices were raised. Raised voices put us at risk. I confronted Jay first. "Jay, you have to calm down, man. This is serious. We have to be quiet." He heard me. He acquiesced. His body relaxed, and he resumed his position sitting just beneath the sink. He gave me a look that said, "I'm cool, but what are you going to do about Hector?" Good question. Hector was cursing and continued making signs with his hands. He was flipping Jay off. I started sternly. "Hector, chill out. Hector, you have to stop. Hector." But Hector was using an elevated outside voice. He was shouting. I pictured an active shooter roaming the halls, walking past our room, but then turning back at the sound of Hector and his swearing. I remembered Columbine. I remembered a myriad of mass shootings. The urgency of the moment possessed me. My students' lives were at stake. My life was at stake. Suddenly and inexplicably, my hand shot out and grabbed the collar of Hector's t-shirt. "If you will not be quiet, I'm gonna kick your ass," I scream whispered. I said it without regard to consequence. My sole goal was to survive and to protect my students at all costs. I should also be clear here that Hector would have been the one kicking my ass in reality. I'm 5'0". Hector was not particularly large, but he had that "I've been confined too long and I just can't take it anymore" look to him. For some reason my magic trick worked. Hector backed off and calmed down. He slumped back into his seat. He transformed before my eyes from an agitated young man to a scared child. I think it was possibly just a shock to his system, like a crying baby receiving a splash of cold water. At about that time, Roy re-entered the classroom. In the chaos of the near fight, I had completely forgotten about Roy's situation. We all resumed our places. Peace had been accomplished. Now, all we had to do was not soil ourselves until the lockdown ended. We resettled into the monotony of waiting and texting. This is when a deep boredom really settled in. We eventually understood that there was no shooter and that we simply had to wait. After 4 hours, I heard the jingling of keys outside the door. Per the sound and the text we had received, we knew that the police were releasing rooms one at a time. We were released and escorted to the gymnasium. The staff meeting the following day was a poorly run therapy session. I don't blame them. Who has the answers for these situations? A student had thought they had seen another student with a gun, which was the reason for the lockdown. The principal took questions. I thought about how when people meet military veterans, they often say, "Thank you for your service," and how in this new world, American teachers are facing experiences similar to the military. The meeting exploded as meetings often do. A teacher stood up and demanded, "I want to know what is being done, how we handle the lockdown protocol going forward." An assistant to the superintendent took questions such as, "What do we do when kids have to go to the bathroom?" She avoided direct responses, deftly responding like a veteran press secretary. Later that day, I was having lunch with other teachers. We were together as our own group, finally, with no administrators to sully our narratives. We were continuing to process what we had just been through. We were one-upping each other with tales of our lockdown experiences. One teacher told a story of how a student raised their hand in class and asked, "Is it okay for a teacher to tell a student they're going to kick their ass?" I slinked in my chair and tried to play cool. Maybe I won't tell my story. The story starts when I was in science class when something happened. We were at the tail end of class when over the PA system we heard, "Everyone, this is not a drill. Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown." Naturally, everyone in the classroom immediately started freaking out and praying while Mr. Walker locked the classroom door. Our classroom is very odd. You know, in science, students don't have individual desks. Instead, we have big white lab tables that are attached to the ground and hold around 4 people. You can't climb under these tables. So instead, our school wants all the science classes to lay down around the back of the classroom. About half the students were lining up back there, while the other half were trying to get a glimpse out of the window. I was one of them trying to look out the window. Stop looking out the window and get back to the wall. We all get up and start making our way back. I immediately start moving towards my friend Lewis. Lewis sat towards the front of the room and could easily see out of the front window. I asked him, "What did you see out there?" Lewis's face showed he was way more concerned than I was currently feeling. "Bro, there were more cop cars than I've ever seen in my life. It's crazy." His voice trembled. Amy overheard our conversation and chimed in. "Do you think it's a shooting?" Hearing her say the word shooting started to make me feel uneasy. "No, I don't think it's a shooting," Amy said. "Me neither," said Lewis. The PA system came back on. "Students and teachers, please stay in your classrooms. Leave the door locked. Someone is in the building. Barricade your class doors with desks if you can, and stay away from the windows. We are trying to get the current situation under control." I didn't recognize a person's voice. Now, I was officially nervous. Everyone else must have also, because the class went dead silent. We all just stared up at Mr. Walker, waiting to see his response. We all sat and talked amongst ourselves, everyone throwing out their theories of what was going on. School shooting was the most obvious because of the times, but no one had heard any type of gunshots. We all heard a massive scream. "No, stop!" It was a woman's voice and she said, "Please!" It sounded like a shriek. Some kids covered their ears. I don't know if it was because of how loud the scream was, or if it was just because it sounded like the woman was scared for her life. The room went absolutely silent. There was no other sound indicating that somebody was hurt. She didn't scream again. Why did she go quiet? The PA system came back on again. "Please remain quiet. If you can't remain calm, we can't get you guys out of this situation. Screaming or fighting only makes this situation worse." The voice coming from the PA was different from the one that spoke to us earlier. It was much deeper and raspy, like this person was holding their breath. Everyone sat quietly, looking at their phones for any indication of what was going on. The very few who could started making phone calls. Our school has terrible reception. Mr. Walker walked over to the front window and looked outside. He looked back at us, and you could see his face was clearly perplexed. He walked back over and kneeled next to us. "All right, kids, I know you're scared, but we're going to be all right. What I want to do is just look outside the door and see what's going on. Maybe try to speak with another teacher." Someone jumped up quickly. "Mr. Walker, someone clearly hurt that screaming woman. We should just stay here," said Amy, clearly terrified. Lewis chimed in. "Why don't we just sit and wait for the cops?" Mr. Walker stood up. "Guys, cops don't help." "What are you talking about?" I said. "I don't know, guys. I have no clue what is going on. I really need to figure it out." Mr. Walker walked over to the classroom door, turned back to us. "Just sit here and wait for me to come back." Mr. Walker slowly cracked the big wooden door, peeking outside as he did it. The creaking from the door opening was so loud since both us and the hallway were so quiet. When he got the door open wide enough, he stuck his head out looking both ways. He looked back at us and gave us a hand gesture and a head nod. Then he stepped outside, shut the door behind him. He was moving quickly, clearly showing he was nervous. He knocked on the door right next to ours with 3 big knocks. No one answered. He knocked again, this time saying, "Hey, it's Mr. Walker. Are you guys okay?" After a brief pause, Mrs. Gardner responded from inside the classroom. "We're all okay in here, Mr. T. I think you should go back into your classroom. We're all just waiting for this to end." "Mrs. Gardner, can you just open up? I really want to figure out what's going on here. I don't know anything more than you, and I really don't think there's any reason for me to open this door. Just go back to your classroom." "I'll write everything." What the hell? Non-stop. There was no other sound, no bangs, slices, footsteps, nothing. Just Mr. W's scream, and then silence. Some people in our classroom screamed, some cried, but most were just silent. I jumped up and Lewis stopped me. "Where are you going, dude?" "I gotta make sure Mr. T locks the door," I said while walking quickly to the door. I started to slow down when I noticed the shadows coming from under the door. It looked like there were 2 people standing outside our door. I could see the door handle from where I was, and the door was locked. The door handle lightly jiggled, but only for a second. I slowly backed away and went back to the wall to sit with the others. Everyone saw the shadows. We were all quiet, all exchanging looks of fear. What happened to Mr. T? We all jumped a little when the PA system kicked back in. It was the same raspy voice from earlier. "Students and staff, we want to thank you for cooperating with us. The situation has been dealt with. Please unlock your classroom doors and wait in your classroom for one of us to come and free you." Everyone in the class started to slowly get up. You could see the look of relief on everyone's face. As we stood up, I noticed the shadows were still under the door. I got a weird feeling. I don't know why, but those shadows gave me the chills. "Guys, wait. Let's just give it a few minutes." Amy looked at me. "Why?" "I want to get out of here as soon as possible." "Look at the shadows under the door. They haven't moved. They're making me nervous," I said, not really being able to explain myself. "Yeah, they are obviously here to get us out of here," Amy said. I looked back for Lewis, but I noticed he was over by Mr. W's desk. I walked over to him. "What are you doing, man?" Lewis looked at me and I could tell he was still freaked. "Dude, look at everyone. No one is going to wait to unlock the door. I'm with you though. I really don't trust whoever is causing those shadows underneath the door. I'm going to hide under Mr. W's desk until I know for sure those shadows are on our side." While Lewis was hiding, I was trying to make calls to anyone, but my calls just wouldn't go through. I managed to gain the courage to get up and grab Mr. W's laptop. There's no way to make phone calls or anything from it. That's when I heard it. "Police, everyone put your hands up." I guess Mr. Walker was wrong. The police did save us. Thank you one and all for watching and listening to this video to the very end. I want to thank you all who are avid and loyal supporters of this channel. I appreciate your love and support in the comment section each and every time. Email your stories to the email in the description box below. Until we meet again, stay sinful.